The fluffy southern biscuits are next from my Sassy Kitchen. Now you must know how to make a southern biscuit if you're a girl from the South. So first of all, if you're using baking soda, you would always use buttermilk. If you're using baking powder, you would use regular milk, or some might call it sweet milk. But if you're using a baking mix, such as Biscuits or a self-rising flour, it already has the baking powder and the baking soda in the mix. Now I'm going to show you a simple way to make a biscuit so it's a no-fail for you when you begin. So I'm using a baking mix that is a self-rising flour. So the self-rising flour that's in the bowl is 2 cups of self-rising flour and 1/4 cup of shortening. Now Crisco shortening is a shortening that was first used for making the southern biscuit. Now the southern biscuit that was original before the 1900s, of course, or before the 20th century, was made with lard, because that's all, of course, they had before the processing came into being with Crisco and other kinds of vegetable shortenings. Now I'm using a pastry blender to do the process of cut in, which is mixing the fat into the flour. You would also do this if you were making a pie crust and maybe some kinds of cookies. If you don't have a pastry blender in your kitchen, that's okay. You can still have a Sassy Kitchen. You could use a dinner fork, or you could use 2 knives. But this instrument makes it much easier to cut the fat into the flour so that you know that it's evenly mixed and distributed before you begin. Now after you've made biscuits just a very few times, you'll know by the feel of the flour that it's soft when you have mixed the fat into the flour. You'll know that it's beginning to become soft. Now, the Southern homemaker always just used her fingers when she mixed the lard, the fat, into the flour. They didn't have pastry blenders or worry about using pastry blenders. But we have these convenient gadgets now, so why not use them? Okay, I'm going to make a well in the center of my mixture, which is just moving back some of the flour and the shortening, and I'm adding my 3/4 cup of buttermilk. Now again, remember to always shake your buttermilk up to distribute the heavy ingredients. I'm going to stir my buttermilk into my flour and my fat, my flour and my shortening, just to moisten. Now once the flour is wet or moist, then I don't want to work it more, because it'll make my biscuits heavy and it'll make my biscuits tough. And you want your biscuit to be fluffy. Now if your kitchen's warm because you've been baking in the oven, or it's a very hot day, you may need to add a little bit more liquid. So you'd add, just in small intervals, a little bit more of your liquid. And then once your mixture pulls from the side of your bowl, then you know that it's going to shape into a dough easily. My biscuit dough is just perfect. It's pulling from the sides. So now I'm going to put about 1/2 cup of flour on my cutting board. And you can use your hand to gauge about 1/2 cup rather than even measure. Okay? So turn all of your biscuit dough out at one time. Always flour your hands. If you forget that process, you'll only forget once. Okay, and then flour your rolling pin. If you're using a metal rolling pin or a marble rolling pin, you really don't have to flour those. A wooden rolling pin, you need to flour well. And hold your rolling pin by the handles. That's why the handles are there. And gently really just tap your dough. Be able to turn your dough in a circle so you know that it's not sticking to your surface. And you want to roll your dough about 1/2 inch thick, just so that you're smoothing it out. You really could just tap your dough and pat your dough if you didn't have a rolling pin, but rolling it makes it have a much smoother surface. With whichever size biscuit cutter you'd like to use, you decide if you want smaller biscuits or the regular size biscuit, because remember, once they bake, they'll double in size. Flour your biscuit cutter just a little bit, and then cut your biscuits close together. Now, some might use a metal spatula to lift their biscuits, but we want to be realistic in what we're going to do. And then put your biscuits onto a baking sheet about 2 inches apart. Remember to grease your baking sheet. You want to hold it away from you. It doesn't really need to be greased because the biscuits already have a lot of fat in them from the shortening. Okay, but I'm going to cut these just a little bit more. I'm going to show you how to also make a drop biscuit that by using my leftover dough, where I'm going to make a cheese garlic biscuit, much like the biscuits that you might even have at a Red Lobster restaurant. It's called a cheese garlic biscuit with some of the leftover dough. With the leftover dough, I'm going to add a cup of cheese. I'm mixing this cheese, which is a cup of grated cheese, into the dough. Now, you could use a cookie scoop to scoop these biscuits to get them the same size onto your cookie sheet, or you could just drop them with your fingers like a drop biscuit, because they need to be rough in texture when you drop them. And all the cheese is going to bake together. I'm going to brush the tops of the garlic cheese biscuits with 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder and 1/2 stick of melted margarine. I'll brush them just slightly before they bake, and then I'll brush them after they bake so that they pick up that buttery garlic taste. Bake these at 425 degrees for 6 to 8 minutes. Now, these are the luscious biscuits that have the cheese and then topped with the garlic powder and the melted butter. So these are your garlic cheese biscuits. Make them rough, make them smooth, cut them into shapes. Serve them with chili, serve them with soups this fall. Enjoy them as an appetizer. And these are our Southern biscuits, all fluffy and tender and just as they should be. From the inside, the texture is soft and the outside is firm. Enjoy them with butter, honey, or your favorite jam.